Hello, we are here again with our next article of 15th August 2021. This is an article by Shashi Tharoor, who is a very prominent politician and once the Chief Minister of Kerala. He writes an article, A Struggle Between Two Ideas of India. He talks about two ideas that India is struggling with. One is a very primitive and outdated idea, while the other one is very current and contemporary. Now, let's not straight away start with the article, and before that, let's discuss a few words that the article has. The word it has are capacious, which is spacious. Snarl is to make an aggressive growl. If you want me to make sentences, then I'd say that snarl I'd use in saying that he snarled when his sister presented him with a cup of coffee and had forgotten to mix sugar in it. Now the next word is profuse, which is abundance of something. Like we could say that my poems are profuse with emotions. And the next word is riposte. Riposte is a quick or clever reply to a criticism. We could use this word in a sentence like riposte, meaning my brother riposted me when I commented on his very bad vocabulary of English. Now the next word is afflict. Afflict is to feel pained or to cause someone pain. The idea of being away from my mother afflicted me a lot. And now transcend. Transcend is to go beyond the range of limits. Now, transcend is to be outstanding or extraordinarily good. The sentence that I would make with transcend could be like there are a lot of Indian writers who have transcended the limits of literature. Let's move to the next few words we have in the article, which is allegiance. Allegiance is loyalty or commitment to your superior. So one sentence that I could make with this would be I'm more concerned about skill of the actors I possess than their allegiance. Now, immutable is unchanging. I could say that the education system of India can be regarded as immutable until the NEP is properly implemented. The next word is dispensation. Dispensation has two meanings, but the one used in this article is a political or social religious system prevailing at a particular time. Now, we could say that we are under the dispensation of Modi government. And the other meaning of dispensation is exemption from a rule or other. The next word is affront. Affront is an action or remark that causes outrage, same as afflict, almost same as afflict. So, I could use affront in a sentence like when my sister affronted me with her bad handwriting, I was outraged. The next word is consensus, which is a general agreement. Now, the public is of consensus of the data provided by the state government. The next word is perpetrate. Perpetrate is to commit a sin. Now, how can we use this word in a sentence? We could say that there are a lot of myths regarding perpetrating, and people say that you will go to hell if you perpetrate a lot. Funny enough. What is centenary? Centenary is 100th anniversary. That is very much easy for you guys to form a sentence. And let's now go to the article. Shashi Tharoor starts very nicely and says that at midnight on August 15, 1947, the independent India was born as its first Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru proclaimed a tryst with destiny, a moment which comes but rarely in history, when we step out from the old to the new, when an age ends, and when the soul of a nation, long suppressed, finds utterance. These were the words Jawaharlal Nehru uttered when he provided freedom, independence to India on 15th August 1947. With those words, he launched India on a remarkable journey, creating a national identity out of a country that many said could not be a nation at all. Before India's freedom, there were a lot of people that considered that India cannot be a nation at all because there was so much diversity in India. Now, in India, Winston Churchill once snarled. Now, snarled, I already told you, is to make an aggressive growl. So, snarl is to make an aggressive growl. Winston Churchill once snarled, saying, India is merely a geographical expression. It is no more a single country than the equator. Now, this is what the world at that time had the image of India as. But now we very much know that India is an established nation. Although Churchill was usually wrong about India, it is true that no other country in the world embraces the extraordinary mixture of ethnic groups, profusion of mutually incomprehensible languages, varieties of topography and climate, diversity of regions and cultural practices, and range of levels of economic development that India does. Now, herein, Shashi Tharoor talks about the diversity India has from being very cold to quite hot, and he says that we have a lot of ethnic groups in our country and we have a number of languages. We have 22 official languages as of such, and he later discloses in the article that there are more than 20,000 dialects that people in India speak or use as their language. So this amount of diversity is quite unbelievable, and so Winston Churchill said that India cannot be a nation itself. Now he proceeds, and yet India, as I have repeatedly argued, is more than the sum of its contradictions. Now this is a very good statement, I find it, because he says that India is not just a sum of its contradictions. Those contradictions were repeatedly stressed by British rulers in self-justification for their rule. Now, these contradictions, these diversities of the number of ethnic groups we have, the number of different languages we speak, and thus we will have difficulty in understanding each other. So, these were the reasons the Britishers gave just to justify their rule on us. Britishers gave the diversity of ours as their reason to rule us. Thus, Benjamin Disraeli argued that India was not a nation. Now, who is Benjamin Disraeli? Benjamin Disraeli was the former PM of UK. He argued that India was not a nation. He says so because it lacked common language, a common religion, a shared tradition, a historical experience, a cohesive majority, and a defined territory. He says that India is not a nation because it doesn't have a defined territory, because you already know there's dispute over LOC. So he says it does not have a defined territory, and the historical experience that India has is not common for all of its people, because people here faced different historical movements, while the people here face a little different, and the languages they spoke too are different. So he says that India cannot be a nation, all of which he regarded as the essential ingredients of a nation. But Indian nationalists had an effective riposte. Now, what is riposte? I already told you, which is it is an quick reply to a criticism. So this criticism that Benjamin Disraeli gave us was reposted by our Indian nationalists. They said that India is a country held together, in the words of Nehru, by strong but invisible threads, a myth and an idea, a dream and a vision, and yet very real and present and pervasive. Now, he said that India is held by strong but invisible threads. The diversity we have is very much a reason for the governance we fail to provide ourselves with. But he says that it is not like India is all different. India has a few threads that link it. So he says that these threads are strong yet invisible. So he says that India is linked by myth, by ideas, by a dream, by a vision. They are very much real. The kind of stories Indian people believe in, and the ideas they share, the dreams they have for their country, and the vision they share of themselves in the future are very much real and present and pervasive. Pervasive is widespread, relatively widespread of an idea. It talks about widespread idea. Pervasive is a widespread idea. Whichever way one thinks about it, the challenge of defining India is immense. Now, he himself agrees that India cannot be defined, as in it's quite difficult to define India. Now, he says that it is a land of snow peaks and tropical jungles with 22 major languages and languages listed in the constitution, and over 20,000 distinct dialects, including some spoken by more people than the ones who speak Swedish, Mars, or Estonia. Now, if you see here, suppose this is Estonia, and here is India, and here are people of India which use a certain dialect. Now, if you compare the population using this dialect and the population speaking Estonian, then you will find that the number of people speaking a certain dialect in India is more than the number of people speaking Estonian. Inhabited at the start of the third decade of the 21st century by 1.38 billion individuals of almost every ethnic extraction known to humanity. It has given birth to 4 major religions and offers a home to many more. Now, India has 4 major religions. We all are aware of it, and it is a home for all. There are a lot of refugees that come into India through Bangladesh, Myanmar, etc. It preaches doctrines of spirituality and wisdom anchored in universalism and inclusivity while still being afflicted by a caste system. Now, India is quite rich in its literature, and it has ideas of spiritualism and wisdom in its literary collection. But it is afflicted. I told you what afflicted means. Afflicted is to being hit by a grave comment or something. So India has a very rich, I would say, ideas, and very rich poets and singers. But it is afflicted by a caste system which is very much prominent in our country. So this fact can't be ignored. So this is what we are afflicted with. We are afflicted by caste system that visits grave disabilities upon millions of its people. It has 2 major classical musical traditions. In this paragraph, Shashi Tharoor mainly talks about the diversity India has. India has mainly 2 major classical musical traditions, which are Carnatic and Hindustani, to go with the innumerable folk disciplines. Leaving them, we also have innumerable folk songs we do with, and multiple classical dance from Kathakali, Kuchipudi, Bharatanatyam, Kathak, Manipuri, Odissi, and so on, that creates a rich jambalaya. What is jambalaya now? Jambalaya is some dish, okay? It's it's not a synonym for dish, but it's a particular dish of some South India. So it offers on that create a rich jambalia of diverse culture transmitted through gurus directly mentoring select students, graduates more engineers than any other countries, and produces by far the largest number of films in the world. Now India produces a lot of engineers every year. In fact, it produces most number of Indias in any other country in the world, and it produces more than 2000 films every year. In the phrase of the American poet Walt Whitman, it is vast. It contains multitudes. Whitman is an American poet, as mentioned in the paragraph itself, and he says that India is vast, it contains multitude. Is there, even one might well ask, a single unchallengeable idea of the Indian nation? India has so many ideas in itself, so many thoughts in itself, and all of them are challengeable. So it's quite rich. Yes, there is. I have written in my book An Era of Darkness about how the notion of Bharatvarsha in the Rig Veda, of a land stretching from the Himalayas up to the seas, contained the original territorial notion of India. Now, earlier, the notion of India was that India is the territorial gap between the mountains in the north and the seas in the south. So this is what India was described as in the Rig Vedas. Now he says that for the notion of India, for the bounds imposed by the mountains and the oceans created common bonds as well, making the conception of India as one civilization inhabiting a coherent territorial space and a shared history, truly timeless. Now, Rig Veda is quite antique and it is beyond time. I mean, we don't have a record where it started or something. So he says that we stretch from mountains to the seas. So he says that this territory was what defined as India in the Rig Vedas. There are deep continuities, therefore, in the imagining of India nationhood, the transcend. What is transcend? I already told you what transcend is. Transcend is to go or be beyond limits. Transcend is to go or be beyond limits. That transcends centuries of internal division. Now, we had multiple internal divisions. We are very much aware of them too. So, no point mentioning them. In that sense, the idea of India is as old as antiquity. So, India is very much old. That's what he means to say. However, the idea of India as a modern nation based on a certain conception of human rights and citizenship, vigorously backed by due process of law and equality before law, is a relatively recent and strikingly modern idea. Now, the idea of India is very much unique and is very much association with the Rig Vedas and the mountains and the seas. But he says that the idea of modern nation being on certain conception of human rights. He brings in human rights. And citizenship, vigorously backed by due process of law. Now, we all citizens of India have human rights because it's mentioned in our constitution, and no one can deny that. No one can take our rights away from us. He says that this idea of human rights and citizenship in India is very modern and new. Earlier, concepts of India drew their inspiration from the mythology and theology. Now, earlier, the conceptions that India had, views that India has had, drew their inspiration from mythology and theology. Earlier, India was a lot influenced by Ramayana, Mahabharata, and many more southern gathas. But the modern idea of India, despite the mystical influence of Tagore and the spiritual and moral influence of Gandhiji, is a robustly secular and legal construct based upon the vision and intellect of our founding fathers. notably in alphabetical order: Ambedkar, Nehru, and Patel. He says that despite the mystical influence Tagore had a very rich literature, and he enriched India's literature, I'd say. So he says that despite the influence of Tagore and the spiritual and moral influences of Gandhiji, India is a robustly secular and legal construct based upon the vision and intellect of our founding fathers. He says that our founding fathers are Ambedkar, Nehru, and Patel, the ones who diligently shaped our constitution. The preamble of the constitution itself is in the most eloquent enumeration. Now, enumeration is explanation. I did not provide it in the vocabulary I shared on the first slides. So, the preamble of the constitution itself is the most eloquent enumeration of this vision. Now, this vision of human rights and of citizenship and of a constitution guiding us and ruling us is a very eloquent, means bold explanation of this vision that Ambedkar, Nehru, and Patel had. In its description of the defining traits of Indian Republic and its conception of justice, of liberty, of equality and fraternity, it firmly proclaims that the law will be the bedrock of the national project. Now, whatever project India carries out, whatever things it does, the bedrock of all these projects, the baseline of all these projects would be the constitution, the law itself. And the law guarantees all its citizens equality, fraternity, and many more stuff. In my recent book, The Battle of Belonging, I've argued that India's is a civic nationalism anchored in the constitution and its liberal democratic institutions, a nationalism of belonging rather than of blood. He says that India's nationalism is not of blood. It's not of blood, it's of belonging. Because the people here are not of the same blood, not of the same race, but they belong to the same constitution. The constitution belongs to all of them. So he says that India's nationalism is of belonging and not of blood. Speaking for myself, when I refer to my own nationalism, spurn any non-Indian allegiance and proudly wear a tricolor lapel pin every day, I am really subscribing to a patriotism that rests on this conception of tells us that disagree with them. Criticism that rests on this conception of India, a love of my country because it is mine, anchored in the institutional and constitutional pillars of civic nationalism. To me, Indian nationalism derives its political legitimacy not from ethnicity, religion, language, culture, or any of the immutable trappings that people acquire from birth, but from the consent and active participation of our citizens as free members of a democratic republic. He says that for himself, who is Shashi Tharoor, for him, the love of his country does not derive from religion, does not derive from language the people speak, and from the culture they follow, from the traditions they follow, but it does not derive from such stuff. Rather, for Shashi Tharoor, the love for his country derives from the participation of citizens. Participation of citizens as in a democracy, that is very much the idea or the essence of democracy. For our nationalism to rise above the Hindi, Hindu, Hindustan idea of India proclaimed by the present ruling dispensation. Dispensation is the political, social, or religious idea or organization at a particular time. I already told you in the beginning. So the idea of for the nationalism of India to rise above Hindutva, Hindustan. For the idea of nationalism to rise above Hindus, above a single religion, we must preserve the idea of India embedded in the republic our founding leaders created. So he says that the nationalism should rise above religion, and in order to do so, we must preserve the republic, preserve the idea of India embedded in the republic our founding leaders created, the constitution which was created by our leaders. We must preserve that constitution and must check on the government how it is violating laws. So he says that created, sustained by liberal democratic institutions, sustained by liberal democratic institutions, constitutionalism that guarantees freedom of speech and association, and representative democracy that empowered the individual citizen irrespective of caste or creed, religion or region, language or literacy. When our people, he says in these sentences, that we must see if our rights are being curbed. We must ask for freedom. We must ask for expression. There is no way the present government can divide us or rule us or suppress us on the basis of the creed or the religion to which we belong. When our present rulers tell us that to disagree with them is anti-nationalism, the present ruler, I would not name them because that might cause some problems, but the present rulers, if there's a person who goes against them, then they call him an anti-nationalist, as if mentioning that he does not promote nationalism and he does not like India, or that to be a true Indian you must be a Hindi speaking Hindu. They also proclaim that to be a true Indian, you need to be a Hindi speaking Hindu. We can answer by pointing to the constitution, whose idea of India they so shamelessly disregard. Now this is very much out of the constitution. It is a violation of the rules laid in the constitution. Our constitution says that our constitution defines citizenship as a different thing, rather which does not associate with caste or creed or religion. But here the government now is calling people anti-nation and anti-nationalists, and says that to be a true Indian you need to be a Hindi speaking Hindu. The true Indian patriot will tell you that in your democracy you don't really need to agree all the time, except on the ground rules of how to disagree. Democracy is of discussion, and for discussion you need agreements and disagreements, and democracy allows disagreements. It says that you don't have to always agree. You can always disagree, but there is a method of disagreement too. You need to see how you disagree, and with the proper moral values you have to disagree, and not start an anti-social revolt or something. Dividing our people into majority and minority, Hindu and Muslim, Hindi speaker and Tamil, nationalist and anti-national, is fundamentally un-Indian and fails to reflect the real nature of our society. Our government today is dividing us on the basis of religion, Hindu, Muslim, on the basis of language, Hindi speaking, Tamil speaking, etc. That is very much un-Indian, Shashi Tharoor says. The suggestion that only a Hindu and only a certain kind of Hindu can be an authentic Indian is an affront to the very premise of Indian nationalism. Now, I told you what affront is. Affront is a comment that causes outrage. So, the suggestion that only a Hindu can be an Indian is an affront to the other people. Uniformity comes at the price of unity. He says that if you want to uniform something, all the people present there need to be united. The insistence on conformity destroys the imperative of consensus. I told you what consensus is. Consensus is a general agreement. Now, suppose you and me are a pair. This is me and this is you. So, we are a pair, and suppose there's a pact within us that asks us to trust each other. And you tell me something, and I say, no, that is not true, and I insist upon confirmation. Then this insistence on confirmation will lead to disruptions within us, will lead to war within us, will lead to quarrel within us. So he says that the insistence on conformity destroys the imperative of consensus. We can't be in consensus if we keep on insisting on conformity. And India that denies itself to some of us could end up being denied to all of us. Now, this government is denying India to certain groups, to certain religion groups. Now, Shashi Tharoor wants us there and asks all of us to look back and check what the government has been doing. And he says that the government today, who's denying India to some people, can deny to all of us and can only keep it to itself for some time, or no, not till when. As we enter the 75th year of our independence, there is a struggle taking place between these two ideas of India. One rests on a narrow conception of Indianness. It is tolerant of difference and suspicious of diversity. Now, this basic idea that he was talking about, the two ideas he was talking about, was what he mentions at the last. He says that the first idea is intolerant of difference. The difference that Indian people have within themselves, the first idea is indifferent, does not tolerate difference, and seeks revenge upon history by perpetrating new wrongs today. Perpetrate is to commit sin. So just to take revenge of what some people did in history, they are perpetrating new wrongs today. The other is broader, capacious and inclusive, while the other one tolerates difference. It is capacious, broader and inclusive, accepting of difference and embracing diversity. It embraces diversity, it lives with diversity, it's secure that these are best accommodated in democratic institutions and processes sustained by our constitutionally guaranteed freedoms. Now, we the people of India need to make sure that we are capacious and have broad views and are not narrowed, and do not just narrow ourselves on one creed and one religion. Rather, spread to all of India and invite people to take decisions for our country. Which India prevails will determine the character of the India that will celebrate its quarter of century from now. Now, this is our 75th Independence Day. He says that which idea will prevail? Will the idea of intolerance of difference will prevail, or the idea of tolerance of difference will prevail? Will decide the 100th celebration of our Independence Day. I consider it to be a very rich